Okay, we're going to learn a mimer from Tafshin Mem. It was actually a Shemitah year. Because it was a Shemitah year, it had a lot of discussions in a certain part of mimer about the king going into the field and the connection of the fields with Shemitah. So even though this year was a Hakel year, but a Hakel year is following the Shemitah year, so there's still some connection. Siyatish Maya early Yom Daled, Bezerish Chodesh El Tavshin Mem. The night going into Wednesday, second day of Chodesh El of the year 1980. Ani Ldodi Lirish Tevis El. I am to my beloved is to me. That's an acronym for the word for the name of our month El. Explains Lukutei Torah. The Indian it's not. El was man his galus El, it's a time of the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy. The Afal became, despite the fact that it's such a high spiritual revelation, Hashem's attributes of mercy, which are higher than Seder Ishtalshlos, and they're considered weekdays. So how could that be? How could it both be such a great revelation, such a powerful revelation, at the very same time it's considered weekdays? In Yuvan, that matter will be understood by bringing the metaphor and analogy of the king, before he arrives in the city, the people of the city go out towards him. They greet him in the field. Similar to this, the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy in the month of El. We speak about the attributes of mercy. These are Hashem's character traits. These are Hashem's attributes. They're the attributes of the king. The place where his attributes are to be found, that is where he is to be found. That's where the king is to be found. Therefore, because he and his midos are one. Became still in all, despite the Hashem himself is found over here with us, and these are considered weekdays. Because it's analogous to a king that's found in a field. Just like a field, there's no all the great, the royal palace, and you're not all dressed up, and so on. Same thing. When Hashem reveals himself in Elul, it's a revelation in his ordinary weekday clothes, and the people are doing the same in a very ordinary weekday fashion. It's not Shabbos, it's not Yom Tov. This will be understood. Why El is the acronym for I am to my beloved is to me. Because then in El, it's a revelation of the level of my beloved. What is the level of my beloved? Hashem and his attributes. You'd give me the 13 attributes of mercy. Chazal say that the 13 attributes of mercy is a very powerful tefillah. When we say the Yud Gimel Sarach Hashem Kel Rach Mechan, etc., she'einon choizrois reikom, that this tefillah, when we invoke this tefillah that has in it the 13 attributes of mercy, these are not refused. These do not go back empty-handed. To such a degree that I am to my beloved, which is I am to my beloved means the Yidden going to Hashem. That's the avoid from below to above. And my beloved is to me. That's That's Hashem coming down to me. Hashem being my beloved is coming down to me. And both those avoiders, from below to above to below, they're both joined in one word in El. That's what he continues over there in Kutei Torah. The Ozer Hashem called Misharoitza, lots is lag, then at this time of Ani Ldodi, the time when the king is in the field, whoever wants can go out to greet the face of the king. He greets everyone with a pleasant countenance and shows a smiling face to everyone. So too, for by way of analogy, b'chodesh El in the month of El, yotzim lahaglo upon his bar basada, we go out to greet the king's face in the field. And this ray comes down from the level of kale. The first of the 13 attributes of mercy is kale. Like it says, Hashem, Hashem, that's only by way of introduction. And kale, rachum b'chanon. So since it's the first, like I said, this always talks about the first of something includes all of it. Bereshis includes all of the Asar Amaris. Anoichi includes in it all the Asar Sadibris. The same thing, Kale, which is the first of the 13 attributes of mercy, includes in it all of the attributes of mercy. Then the Rebbe says, if we come shittis, there are different opinions about how we count the 13 attributes, how we divide that sentence. But we're now going according to the view that Kale is the first of them. Like it says, that Kale Hashem is the one that illuminates to us. This is the revelation that takes place. The king is in the field. The attributes of mercy, the level of Kale, is shining to us. So now the Rebbe, in most of this Maamar, is going to focus about the field. He's going to bring a very interesting topic that I don't recall seeing in other Maamarim speak about it, not even other Maamarim of the Rebbe. The Rebbe, we know, in many Maamarim, analyzes a lot this metaphor, this analogy of the Alter Rebbe and L'Chutei Torah, of the king being in the field. But he analyzes different aspects. He analyzes the idea of the king going out and the people of the field, and he analyzes the smiling face and the countenance, etc., etc. But here, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the idea of the field and levels in the field. This is something which I don't recall in other places where the Rebbe, in Maamarim at least, will analyze it. It's known that there are many levels in fields. What's it mean? It's not the same a field that's close to the city versus a field that's further from the city, or a field that's so far it's close to a desert, close to a wilderness. Like it's explained over there in L'Chutei Torah, and then he says in other places as well. Skip the parentheses. Hachiluk bein ir Sodom midbar. And L'Chutei Torah, he explains in that Maamar Ani Ldodi, he explains that there's a level called the city in Avodas Hashem. There's the level of the field, and there's the level of the wilderness. So if there's these three levels, so even in the field itself, it's understood that there's, if Ir is the highest level, the level of the city is the highest level, and the level of the wilderness, the Alter Rebbe explains the lowest level. So it's understood that a field that's closer to the city is a much greater and better quality field. And in a similar vein, if a field is closer to the wilderness, more distant from the city, it's not as a great quality of a field. Similar to this, we find in Halacha, the Gemara speaks about it. These are different levels of fields that the Gemara and the Halacha speaks about, that when a person needs to pay certain things that he owes someone, and if they don't have the cash to pay, so then they collect from the person's property. They can collect their fields. And depending on what the obligation is, so depending on that, it will depend what type of field can the person you're owed money demand. It depends if the person is lent you money, or if you owe him because of damages that you inflicted on him, or whatever other reasons. So the Gemara categorizes three general levels of fields concerning monetary issues. There's idis, that's the top value field. There's beinanis, the word average, normal, in between. And ziburis is the worst type of field. So therefore, the Rebbe, by extension, says, if there's different types of field, so then the anshe asada, the people of the field, are also in a different manner as well. Zem moving from this understood. The einam doim anshe asada, the sada idis, la anshe asada, the sada ziburis. It's not the same. The people of the field of a better type of field, of the best type of field, versus the people of the field of a lower quality field. Shem Shuva Pashtas, just like it's in a simple sense, Besada, it is in a better type of field. There has to be less toil in the physical. There has to be more knowledge of the characteristics of the field. Like the Chazal say, that who are considered the inhabitants of the earth, those that are involved in settling the earth, they knew the different characteristics of the land that they were planting. Realization is this a field and an earth that's better to plant olive trees, or it's better to plant a vineyard, etc. So that is all. When you're dealing with a higher quality field, you need to be more aware of its properties and more on a greater, if you will, mental level. So you have a better field, and the people that are working it are on a better, higher level. Is opposed to a lesser field, the low value field. One needs to put in much more toil in the physical. There's more rocks, there's more plowing and preparing, and it's a lot harder, much more physical labor rather than mental acumen to be able to distinguish what type of plants to use, plowing the field, etc. From this, we could also extrapolate and understand concerning the spiritual avoid of the people of the field. Like it says, it says, 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vines. Look at Dargasanal, that the people that the Torah says you will work your field, there are spiritual ideas of working the field. There are spiritual types of engaging with the world, in other words, and there are people of a higher level of engagement with the world, and then there are people that are engaging with the world in a lesser developed way, in a less spiritual way, a more physical way. So he goes on top of the next page. This is the uniqueness and the novelty of the month of the avoid of the month of El, avoid of the Sada, the avoid of the field. Then there's a special vitality and energy. A special uniqueness in the service of Yidden. The month of El is a month of mercy. It's called this. There's a lot of descriptions for the month of El. It's called the month of Tshuva, and one of the things is it's called the month of compassion and mercy. It's also called Chodesh HaCheshbon, the month of accounting, that we take an accounting of the entire year. With many details that each one of these have, whether it's the month of compassion, the month of accounting, etc. The whole prat, and every one of these details of the month of El, Odur is permeated b'nasa ba'ofen Ani Ldodi, and it is done in a manner of I am to my beloved. Ba'ofen kazen in such a manner sha'avoided Ani Ldodi mevil the agilim al ma'ilad b'chines b'doidi li. Avoid of I am to my beloved brings about the revelation from above of a doidi li. We said before, Ani Ldodi b'doidi li is part of one word. It's part of the word of El. That there's avoid al that engenders and brings about avoid al. Like we mentioned before, all 4 components here he divides into 4. Before he just said but it's 4 words. So there's ani, and then Ldodi, and then Ldodi, and then li. So all these 4 ideas, components that make up this phrase are joined in one word. This indicates the special union that there is to be found. Like explain the details of this service in the Maamar Ani Ldodi. Hachil Medrush Balchut Torah now beginning from the Maamar in the Torah that we quoted before. Bedrush Anasim Amalim Mekoyim, and in the Maamarim of the leaders of Chabad that took the place of the Alter Rebbe. Especially according to the addition that my father-in-law said in the Maamar, the leader of our generation said on this Mashal B'Kutei Torah, that he said the following, and the Rebbe very often emphasizes this. Not only quoting the phrase of the Alter Rebbe, but when the king goes out into the field, everybody is allowed to go out and to greet him. Even more so that we are able to. Because a person can always say, I know Hashem is available, but who am I? How can I approach Hashem? How am I going to bring myself to the Eibishter? So the Rebbe explains that the Frierdiker Rebbe makes sure that to add and elucidate on what Alter Rebbe said. The Rebbe also in one place explains that what was taken for granted in a previous generation needed to be explicitly stated in a later generation. That's why even though the Alter Rebbe only said Rashoim, they're permitted, and he didn't say Yecholim, they are able to, but because in Alter Rebbe's times it was understood, if we are permitted, it means we have the capability, it means Hashem gives us the power and the strength to be able to do this. But as the generations got lower and we're not on the level that we were before, so we don't appreciate as well what Alter Rebbe says, so we need to have the Frierdiker Rebbe to come and explicitly state that it's not just that we are permitted to do so, but we are able to do that, we are capable to do this. The Rebbe says this is similar to, let's say, you have what was sufficient in the times of the Mishnayos, in the times of the Gemara needs a full elaboration on it, or was sufficient, let's say, to understand Chumash before Rashi came along. Now you need to have Rashi to be able to understand Chumash. As the generations became lower, we don't have things, the clarity of the previous generations. The Rebbe says parenthetically, like it's explained in a different place, the wondrous thing that's added through this idea of that the Frierdiker Rebbe in his Maamar of the year 1940 adds the words not just Rashoin but also Yechayim. They avoid the zoo, and through this avoid of greeting the king in the field, Mamshichim we draw down in a literal, in a simple way, being written and being sealed for good, for a good year and a sweet year spiritually. Days of through that we draw down that we are inscribed and sealed for good, for a good sweet year in the physical sense, in the literal sense. Why is this so crucial? The physical thing, we're talking about such spiritual things. The title, like Alter Rebbe explains a little bit the title. The Ikir Adin B'Rosh Hashanah, the main judgment on Rosh Hashanah is on physical matters. Therefore, they're important that Ani Ldodi B'Dodi Li don't just bring about the spiritual revelations of Dodi Li, but it should manifest itself in a physical revelation in the good and sweet year for us in physical matters. In this idea of drawing down through our avoid of Ani Ldodi B'Dodi Li, we're drawing down it begins already on the beginning of the month of El. Move like it's brought down from the Maharil. It's a custom, and the custom of Yidden is Torah. A person writes to his friend a letter from the first day of El and on. He hints to the Yid that he should merit in the days of judgment that are coming on. It should be for good. That it should be written and sealed in the book of good life. Now, getting back to the picture about the field. He's not finished with the field. He's going to elaborate some more on the field. The field was an analogy for the weekdays. That's what we said. How is it the idea that the 13 attributes of mercy could be revealed? 13 attributes of mercy is Hashem himself. He and his midas are all one. And we know the 13 attributes of mercy are very high revelation. How could it be that it's weekdays? And the answer was because in the month of El, the 13 attributes of mercy is like the king coming into the field. So that means what is the metaphor that we're learning out from the idea of field? We're learning out about the idea of weekdays. So just like we went through before talking about different field levels, so the same thing, we have to know that in our lives, even in the mundane matters of our lives, there are different levels, just like there's fields of different qualities. In his Barley, it was explained previously, though the general days of the week are called the field. There's still different levels in the fields. There's, like we said, the best quality field, the average quality field, and the low quality field. And these distinctions could be in that very field, more in the metaphor, like in the weekday itself, between one day and another day. The Chol Yom of Yom Avodah the Zohar uses an expression. Every single day has its own job, has its own mission. So it could be one weekday on the first day of the week, I could be in a more elevated state. The middle of the week, I could be in a different state of spiritual awareness and so on. And similar to this, so too, there are differences in the field as a result of the changes in the owner of the field. What does that mean? So he says, similar to what Rashi writes on the pasuk, that when Avram came to Ephraim to buy the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, and the field that housed the Ma'aras Machpelah, so when he purchased it, it says, by Yakom stay Ephraim, that the field of Ephraim arose. What does that mean, arose? Avram purchased it. It went from Ephraim's possession to Avram's possession. So Rashi explains, what is this unusual language of Vayakom that this field had a rising, it rose up, because it went from being owned by Ephraim to being owned by someone of the stature of Avraham Avinu. Through the owner of the field being in a much higher state, in an elevated state, he affects rising up and an ascent in all of his possessions. So the same thing, that the person impacts the weekdays. If the person is in an elevated state, so the field, which is the weekdays, are now in a more elevated state than they are on their own. In other words, there's the weekdays on their own, and we know, like, the days that are closer to Shabbos have still from the aura of Shabbos, days that are maybe further from Shabbos have less of that. That's the days on their own. And then there is the advantage of the weekdays that it's my weekday. And if I'm in a more elevated state today, this raises up that weekday as well. So the Rebbe, like I mentioned before, when the Rebbe was saying the Sikha, it was seems to be a Shnas Shemitah year, a sabbatical year. So therefore, he's going to talk a lot about how the elevation happens in the field through the owners of the field. Then move on. From this also understood that there is an ascent in the field in the 7th year that's considered a Shabbos for Hashem. 7th year is a Shabbos year, a sabbatical year. Doesn't mean that the field ceases to be a field. It's a Shabbos Hashem. The field is elevated, it's holy, but it doesn't stop being a field. At Verte Sada, it doesn't stop being a field. El asada nicharim tziusik mashay b'shana shishis mashay yi b'shana shminis. The field remains the way it was in the 6th year prior to the Shemitah year, and as it's going to be in the 8th year after the Shemitah year. Yes, by Inyan Miyuchad, but on the 7th year, there's a unique thing in the field. Shenikir boy b'shanazu, that's recognizable in this year. Shabalabayis shaloyu adoin kala olam manhiga kadosh baruch hu, that its owner is the master of the entire world, and the one that runs him, Hashem. The Indians are nikir boy gamleini basar, and the fact that it's recognizable in the field is not like some spiritual thing, but one can recognize it with eyes of flesh. Even in the eyes of a non-Jew. Everybody sees that in this year we do not work the field. That the land will have a Shabbos. There's a change both in the owner of the field, that he rests and he takes a vacation from the work of the field of the earth. And there's a difference also in the field itself. And that also that the field is also in a state of being in a state of rest. And the Rebbe goes on to the brackets that according to halacha, there are different levels of different ways how this is incorporated. The rest of the field, is it something considered that the person has to consciously make the field temporarily released from his ownership, or is it Hashem makes the field released from his ownership? And this has certain halachic implications. We're going to skip the brackets, but the main point is that the field and the person working the field are considered to be at a state of rest, at a more spiritual state, at a state that's recognizable that it's Hashem's. So, second paragraph on the 3rd page. From this will be understood concerning the avoid of a person in the weekdays that's called field. Again, it's the whole time we're bringing an analogy for the idea. The field, that's the days of the week. King being in the field, that's the revelation of the Eibishter, even in the mundane weekdays of the month of the days of El. Though the sabbatical year and its implications for the land is only something in Eretz Yisrael. There's no obligation whatsoever that if I farm in anywhere in the world outside of Eretz Yisrael, whether it be in Japan or America or in London, doesn't make a difference. I have no farms in London, maybe in England somewhere, that I need to go ahead and give it a rest. Still in all, moving still in all, it's understood. When the 7th year comes along, when the Shemitah year comes along, there is the spiritual service of the Shemitah also outside of Eretz Yisrael. Similar to what the Chazal said, that the davening was established in the place of Karbanos. Just like there's a change in the physicality in this year in the Holy Land, meaning physically there's a change that this field is not going to be worked in the Holy Land. That's a land that constantly the eyes of Hashem is in from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Skip the brackets, 2 lines down. Eretz Yisrael, this matter is drawn down and it influences all the lands, all the countries, all the fields. Even at this time, even in our times, that in the Shemitah year, even if I'm living in the United States, and even I'm working the field no different this year than the year before, there's still a specific quality in the person's service to Hashem. This advantage and quality is specific to those aspects in our spiritual service. That's called a field. Since in a Shemitah year, the fields are different. So therefore, what we need to do is see and examine the avoida, how it's different by me. As we're going to explain that the field avoida is involving etc. So it's not so much the difference in matters of being out of this world, in matters of royalty and mitzvahs and Torah. It's matters of field things that there's going to be a difference in our avoida in the seventh year. So again, regardless of the seventh year or not, coming back to this idea that the king is in the field. That means whatever type of field work we're involved in spiritually, the king, the Eibishter himself, expresses himself and comes down to us. This is also understood in the above mentioned mat. That the month of El is like the king that finds himself in the field. The key since in this year the fields of every single one every single Yid is in the manner that the land rests, and it's considered a Shabbos for Hashem. Though, like we know, there's a higher level, which is the city. So field is only a lower, it's considered something lower in regards to the city. The city is the ultimate highest type of avodah. Yet still in all, Mishum Zamoid in Chodesh Elul, all his gals have Mukavats, Mishal Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Shamelech Nimtum his galam gam besoda. Because of this, the idea of the month of El shows on a very deep and essential love of Hashem to Yid, because the king is found and revealed to them even in the field. Even though you would say, the king belongs in the city, and only when a Yid is doing lofty things like city-related matters, Torah mitzvahs, Shabbos and Yom Tov, being out of field matters, that's when Hashem should reveal himself to him. That's not the way it works. Hashem's great and powerful love is that he reveals to us even when we're in field things. So despite the fact that the field is in a lower level than the city, understood the great advantage that's incomparably higher of the king that finds himself in the field. In the seventh year, compared to the king that finds himself in the field in the 6 years. Concerning this matter, the advantage of this year, we say, Ani Ldodi, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. The greatness of this year, of the seventh year, affects and sent both in the matter of I am to my beloved, by Rotzen L'Kabel Pnei HaMelech B'Yos B'Soda. What does it mean, I am to my beloved? That's the will and the desire of the Yid to greet the king while he's in the field. The Hein being a Lead also increases and brings a greater advantage in my beloved to me. The ray of the 13 attributes of mercy, like we said before, Kale is the first of the 13 attributes of mercy. The Kale of Hashem is illuminating to us and shining to us that it's on a much higher level. By the way, if I can insert something having to do with our year, the Rebbe sometimes speaks about that the year of Hakil is like taking Shemitah and going a level higher. So perhaps in that vein, we could say this is a Hakil year. We have the level that's going even higher than what the Rebbe is talking about over here in the Shemitah, the special quality. Anyway, that's my own commentary. Take it as you wish. Last 3 lines on this page. The main emphasis in this avoida, the avoida dealing with the field, keeping in a mice is the idea of action. That's what the field's about. That action is primary. That's the novelty and uniqueness of a field in comparison to the royal palace. You do as it's known as Shebehechel Malchus Arimandamet for B'mocha Kama Malka Rezumrida B'malchus. So it's known that in the royal palace, someone that even signals with his finger, makes a circle in the air, is considered a rebellion against the king. Balachas kam v'kamo she'osur lasais melacha b'fnei hamelech b'machusay. It's how much more so that it's understood that a person may not do any work in front of the king in his royal palace, as opposed to the field. The main thing of the field is the idea of work and action. It's the work that you will do. Like it says, 6 years you shall sow your field. We're talking here about a Shemitah. And the Shemitah year, it says that in the 7th year, you shall the earth shall rest. Even in the 7th year, there is not lacking work. Because the blessing that will come down the 7th year, in the sabbatical year, in the Shemitah year, is also connected with the actions of people that they did action in the 6th year. Like it says in the pasuk, I will command my blessing to you in the 6th year, and it will give you enough food for the following years. What does this mean practically? It says about what does this mean? The service of a person, not only when he's at his home or when he's in a city, even when he's in the field, when he's traveling. It's summer months. People are traveling the whole time. They're not at home. Some people take advantage of it. They're not at home, so not everything has to be like. So he says, also while being in the field, he knows that with him is the King of Kings, Hashem. Therefore, he has a bittul of the very essence to the Eibush. He draws down and brings this bittul also into his field, into his mundane matters, into his being away from his holy things and away from his holy environment. I'm explaining the idea of a field in the 7th year, in the service of a person. The fact that every single day does its particular avodah, like we mentioned before, every single day has its unique concept. How do you do it? It's known in the 7th year. Since the Eden were free from working the land, they filled this time in matters of Torah and its mitzvahs. And simply put, that there had to be, and there was an increase, and there has to be in the 7th year, even at present, an increase in matters of Torah and mitzvahs. According to what's explained in a different place, it's impossible that in Torah there should be some type of deficiency. Moving to this understood. That the advantages and the qualities of the avodah of the field, sowing your field and pruning your vine, or your orchard, in the 7th year, we don't miss out on whatever spiritual significance there is the idea of the working of the field. We are still going to accomplish it through our being involved in Torah and mitzvahs, what we would have accomplished through working the field. Yes, we can connect this that Rebbe says with the Chumash shir of that day that Rebbe said the Maamar on Tuesday night going into Wednesday. That it says at the beginning of the shir of Shlishi, it says Lo Yil Kehanim Alavim Kol Shevet Levi Chelik Benachlim Yisrael, that the Kohanim, the Leviim, the entire Shevet Levi will not have a portion and an inheritance with Yidden. That the fire offering of Hashem and his inheritance, his lot, is what they will consume. In other words, from the gift of the karbonis and so on, what the Yidden give the Kohen. And you will not have a land apportionment amongst his brothers. Hashem is his portion and his lot, like he spoke to him. At the end of the Shir Chumash of Tuesday, it says, that in Shevet Levi, Hashem chose from all your Shvatim, Lamed L'Sharos B'Shem Hashem, to stand and serve in the name of Hashem, who Banav Kol Yom, him and his children all the days. Parshas Ekev, and concerning this, it says in Parshas Ekev, Be'esa He Gived Hashem Shevet Levi Goyim. In that time, Hashem separated the Shevet Levi. Therefore, Levi did not have a portion and a lot with his brothers. Hashem is his lot. Rashi explains it's not a deficiency. They're not missing out by not having a portion in the Holy Land. Since they were separated for the service of the Mizbeach, and they weren't free to sow and to plant. Therefore, Hashem is considered his lot, and therefore he takes a ready-made reward from the royal household. In other words, the king rewards the Levi directly with it, without the Levi needing to go ahead and deal with agriculture and so on. They get everything already made, which the king, the Eibishter, apportioned to them. The Kibush Noitel Prasman Beis HaMelech, since he takes his reward from the royal treasury. Moving Shenoitel Gam Chelik Bebiza, they also take a portion of the booty when they conquer nations. Before like explained in the laws of kings, that the king takes a portion in whatever is acquired through conquest. So therefore, Shevet Levi, who's getting from the house of the king, they get from that as well. From this is understood that they're not lacking in the matter of the apportionment and the lot that they receive. Upon the last was since they're not free to be involved in it. He receives a reward and his payment from the royal treasury. It includes this at an even higher way. So this is similar to the idea of the seventh year, where everybody's like on that type of state, where they're removed from mundane matters, and even while being removed from mundane matters, they have all the qualities and advantages of engaging with mundane matters. From this understood in the service of a person. Those that are from the tribe of Yisachar, meaning those that are Morei Torah, those that are masters of Torah. In other words, those that devote their time to Torah study. There has to be by them the feeling that they should not be embarrassed from those that are scoffing. What are you doing, sitting and learning a whole day? You should be involved in business. The scoffer could be someone that observes Torah mitzvahs and fulfills all the mitzvahs. Still in all, this scoffer has a portion and a lot in physical work. Whom Shevet Zvulun, because that person is from the tribe of Zvulun spiritually. And he complains. It says whoever wants to become rich, the Chazal say, Yarba B'schoira, he needs to, in business. This idea is lacking by masters of Torah. The riches is not the same riches that are by the tribe of Zvulun, the ones who are involved in business. For this we say that those that are involved in Torah professions and Torah study are not chas v'sholom in a lower level, but just the opposite. Even a matter of riches, and the expression of Mishnah, your table is greater than their table. It doesn't just mean that they have a portion of the world to come. Ashiras Baruchni is they have spiritual riches. Alagam Shulchanam Gashmias. When they say your table, the Mishnah says, it means their physical table is greater. Because of who Uban of Kolayam. That's what the pasuk concludes over there. It speaks about Shevet Levi, that he and his children all the days. Move on. Seemingly, it's not understood why specifically over here we're talking about Levi and the Shevet Levi's job, etc., and how they're not to have a portion of the land and they get their portion from Hashem. Why is it necessary to mention specifically the idea of children? Even if he wouldn't have mentioned the children are automatically from Shevet Levi. They are members of Shevet Levi. So because they're members of Shevet Levi, they already get brachas on their own. It seems to be that the pasuk is saying that because of what the fathers did, that's why the children of Shevet Levi will receive the blessing. The children of Shevet Levi are devoted to Hashem. They're doing the work of Hashem, so they should be receiving it anyway, the blessings, on their own, not because of what their fathers did. But the idea behind this is, this is considered the perfection of the father. That this is also coming down in his children. Like the expression of the Mishnah, that one of the things that's beautiful for tzaddikim is literally the idea of children, so that it transmits what they have to the children. Similar to that, why did he conclude the idea all the days? He said already the children. So we know the children, offspring. What's it mean all the days? The Isa of Sifri, it's brought down Sifri. I feel the b'chutzlar. It's even outside of Eretz Yisrael. Not just in the literal idea of chutzlar, it's that those Levim, they're outside of Eretz Yisrael. They're not involved in the work in the Beis HaMikdash. They still have this as communicated to them. And also, those that are chutzlars beruchnias also have this idea, even though they don't have the physical, they're not in the spiritual level of Eretz Yisrael. Zelgam close, this is also the general idea of the month of El. Like it was brought down earlier, and the custom is to write in a letter from the beginning of the month of El, a bracha of being written and sealed for good and sweet year. By Safa and adding, since one should explain as much as possible, should be in a visible and revealed good. That's the idea that I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. Is an acronym for the word El. Immediately after the ascent from below to above, I am to my beloved. Surely comes down what's drawn down from above, that my beloved is to me. The king is found in the field. We greet his face. We go along with him in the city until his royal palace. So it should be literally, like it says, you will be collected one by one, the children of Yisrael. When Mashiach comes, they went to exile to Edom, the Shekhinah was with them. And the same thing when they rise from Edom to go back to Eretz Yisrael, the Shekhinah goes up with them. Like it says, Hashem will return your captives or your attorneys. It doesn't say he will return others, but he himself will return. That Hashem himself will return with the Yidden. They're going to his royal palace, Eretz Yisrael, to Eretz Yisrael. A land that constantly the eyes of Hashem, your God, is in it from the beginning of the year till the end of the year. Visham Gufan over there itself, in Yerushalayim, the holy city, Kiryas Melech Rav, the great capital of the king, Ir Bachar David, Melech Yisrael, the place where David rested, the king of Yisrael. Sham Gufal Beis HaMikdash, from there itself to the Beis HaMikdash, Mikdash Adonai Kanidach, the Mikdash of Hashem, your hands prepared, Begula Mitzvah Shleiman, the true and complete redemption of Meir Mamish, and speedily in our days, Mamash.